Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about freelancers. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, why is it that freelancers seems to be so sensitive about being freelancers and their skill level? What is it? Insecurities, minority complex, or something like that. It's, at least in my experience, usually the reason why people get very defensive about the role that they have in IT and so forth. It's not just that. It's not just in IT. But it usually comes down to that they perceive themselves or other people. Well, it might be all in their head, or it might be that they've been exposed to something like that. They have been made to feel like less than whatever is considered to be the biggest and the best and so forth. It's sort of like some countries have minority complexes where they have this idea that the bigger countries look down upon them because their culture is behind, or their technology is behind, or like whatever, like it, and so forth and so forth. And if you have a low sense of self-esteem, or it's important to you to be considered by other people to be something, it's very easy for people to kind of get very to get very aggressive and like sort of stomp around and say that, oh, we're equal to all the in-house developers or consultants and so forth. And that's something that I've said to a few people on the channel as well. To them, I've tried to explain to them that from my perspective what the difference is between a freelancer and a consultant, because they can be the same thing depending on how you define it. It's just that in my region usually we make a distinction between a freelancer and a consultant, because a freelancer, per like popular opinion over here at the very least, is an individual who works as a solo software developer, usually works completely alone, takes on like smaller scale projects or things like that because they're running their own business. It's sort of like a one-person web agency or something like that. That is the common way. The thing we usually use for the term consultant. Consultant is usually someone who it's like a professional grade software developer. It's someone who has a background working on larger scale projects, usually works with an agency or something like that. It's not always the case, but it's almost a synonym for someone who has a stronger development portfolio, or like a stronger CV of development experience than a freelancer. That's not always true, because there's plenty of people who go and they start out working in IT and they realize that, hey, I don't want to be my own boss, so I want to do something but for myself, and like they are super good, and then they become consultants for an agency, or they become like a one-person type of consultant or something like that. It's just that usually the work that they do is towards the bigger customers, because the average freelancer, that's why it has a negative tone for a lot of people, the average freelancer simply does not have the necessary skills to work in the more serious projects. And the reason is very similar if you are how do I put this, like there's a difference between being there's a perceived difference between having someone, I don't know, who teaches music on the side and calls themselves a musician, and someone who is a rock star. It's at very different levels that you are practicing your craft. And for the average person who is, because the average that I talk to, when someone uses the term freelancer for themselves, we're talking about an individual who is usually self-taught, usually has never worked on anything large or something like that. That's not always the case, but as I said, the average is that the people who are really, really good, they refer to themselves as consultants, or like they work for agencies and so forth, and they usually have larger scale projects. That's not always true. There are a lot of consultants who are not that good either, in terms of like and I mean in-house people as well, so it's really hard to say that one is better than the other. It's just that it's sort of the same sensation of like it's an ego thing. I've always found it to be, and it's such a common one and you have no idea when that ugly mug is gonna, or that monster is gonna show itself. It's often it's very funny, guys. I have been in so many interviews now where I ask very simple questions about, can you explain to me what accessibility on the web is? Can you explain to me what media queries, sort of how they work, and so forth and so forth. And you have these freelancers who've been working for 20 years and they can't answer, because the only work they ever do is in WordPress or Gatsby or like some other tool that basically does everything for them. They don't know anything. I mean, I've asked a guy who's been, I remember it wasn't all that long ago, I asked him, could you explain to me what an HTTP call is, and sort of like how the whole like transferring of information sort of works, and what methods do we have? He could not answer me. He has worked for 20 years and he does not know the basics of how the web works. That is not a professional software developer. That is an amateur, a person, as I said, I can't take him into a company where that sort of information is really important if you're going to be part of designing any type of APIs, or like how all that sort of stuff works, and headers and all that stuff is sort of important when you work on larger scale systems where everything from security to API design to architecture, and then of course coaching other developers who may be very new and so forth. That is not a professional. But then again, I've also been in meetings where you meet a freelancer or a consultant or someone like that who, as I said, they've been working for so many years that they just realize that, hey, I can actually make more money, or I want to be my own boss, or I sort of want to do my own thing, and then they completely blow your mind because they're so goddamn good that they can work wherever they want. But that is not the norm. They do exist. And so what usually happens is that's, as I said, that's that sensation of minority, just as with people who are self-taught versus people who have a college education, because society or the community consider one to be better than the other, and so the people who don't have the thing that everybody wants, well, they feel a sense of minority. It's the same thing that fat people who go on a rampage on social media about fat is beautiful and all of this stuff. They're doing the exact same thing. It literally is the same thing. You have something that most people consider to be the ideal. You can't meet the ideal, and now instead of trying to be a better person or so forth and so forth, you go on the offensive because, I don't know, your ego or something like that kicks in, and you decide to have a confrontation with people and like justify yourself to other people. When I kind of go, if you just either don't care or become better at what you do or something like that, you will start to realize that all of this sort of doesn't matter, because regardless of if you go in a verbal battle with someone and try to explain that, oh, freelancers or fat people or thin people or athletes or rock stars, like everybody's better than anybody else. I mean, you can always make that argument. If you just choose your viewpoint carefully enough, you will always be right. But at the end of the day, what really matters is who is going to do the hiring, who is the person who you're trying to prove yourself to, and how do they feel about the situation. And if you really thought about it, that basically means that what is right and what is wrong, and what is good and what is bad, sort of depends on who you're talking to. So what I want you to take away from this is that usually I find that the reason why freelancers, or not just freelancers, because I don't think that's why it's so hard to define a term, is sort of like juniors and seniors, or seniors arrogant pricks, or juniors scared little kids, etc., etc. It's not going to be something that applies to everybody. It's just something that I base on personal experience with different types of people and working with many types of profiles and doing hiring and so forth and so forth. And guys, I mean, I have seen CVs from freelancers who have so many years. They claim everything from I'm like deep into testing, deep into all of this. They say all the right things, and then you talk to them and they can't even explain a unit test to you. They can't even like write a unit test because they're full of shit. And the reason why I can spot these sort of patterns is because I also work I also do this job, and I have done it at a freelancer's level. I've done it at an agency level where you take ad hoc projects. I've done it at a like a mid-sized, like small startup, all the way up to a gigantic super corporation when I sit in a room with people who have like 5 times my salary, and like we're talking about projects that are going to cost like tens of millions of euros long term. And so I know what the different levels usually look like, and a lot of the more experienced software developers, they know what this sort of is all about. And so when you're dealing with people who usually get very defensive or sensitive, it is because, as I said, they feel as if they're being looked down upon, and that's really nobody's fault. That's on them, because it's being a freelancer, it's just a choice, just as anything. It's sort of like, if you're a nurse, are you better than a doctor? Well, depends on how you ask. The nurse might have just decided that, hey, I don't want to go through all the hassle of being a doctor or something like that. It's not that they can't do the thing, it's just that it's a choice that they made. But some people feel like there's some type of prestige in the whole thing, just as being self-taught versus having a college education. Some people, unfortunately, can't afford college, so they have to do the best they can. And you know what? A self-taught person can outcode a person with a college degree. I've seen it 100 times before, and a freelancer could be a lot better than a consultant or an in-house master, master software developer, or like whatever they call them. It really comes down to the person. So sweeping people over, like doing these generalizations, saying, oh, freelancers are this, consultants are that, is absolute bullshit. Because I've talked to all of these sorts of people who have like a label for whatever they are, and I can see very clearly that there is only one single constant, and that is that you have to talk to the damn person to figure out how good they are. Because the term doesn't really represent anything apart from popular opinion, sort of what someone is all about, and then you talk to them and either that confirms everything, or it turns out that, hey, actually this time there was an exception to the rule. Have a great day.